Let's bring in Sultan Barakat. He's director of the Global Institute for Strategic Research at Hamad Bin Khalifa University. He joins me live from Doha. There's so many things to talk about here. I'll just start, though, with that news that just came in of reported, claimed Hezbollah missile attacks over the border, killing one, injuring 7 at the moment on Israeli territory. To you, does that represent an escalation, or is this the sort of thing that's kind of happening on a regular basis? We maybe just don't always hear about it.
No, this is part of the tactical engagement that Hezbollah has been doing with Israel over the last few weeks. In fact, from the 7th of October onwards, I think we're all now aware of the fact that Hezbollah and by extension Iran are desperate to avoid a direct confrontation with the Israelis and a greater escalation with the Americans. But the tactical engagement is something that they've calculated and they're determined to pursue. And obviously the objective, as far as they see, is that it splits the resources that Israel has between the north and Gaza.
We've just had, we're told that the negotiations will continue in Egypt, but some of the parties have already left, so that's going to be difficult. But it seems that nothing tangible came out of the initial talks. It feels sometimes to me like neither party is particularly looking for a deal here on a ceasefire. Why is it proving so difficult to obtain?
Well, I think the declared position of Netanyahu's government is simply unattainable. He wants to have total victory, destroy Hamas, dismantle its infrastructure, kill. He doesn't even talk about capturing, he's talking about killing its leaders. And at the same time, he wants to negotiate with them to release the prisoners and believe him that after 6 weeks of opposing in the fighting, he will be reconsidering his position. Now, that is, of course, difficult to sell to any party. And rightly so, Hamas are conditioning further release on ending the conflict, on a permanent ceasefire, and very importantly, on a total withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip. What Netanyahu has in mind, I suspect, is he's already split the strip into 3 or 4 zones, and he would like to negotiate in the future the reunification of Gaza and the withdrawal of his troops as part of a greater deal to ensure the security of Israel. And of course, Hamas is not interested in this at this stage. They want to see the immediate withdrawal of the Israeli troops from Gaza. And given how far these two positions are from each other, it's not surprising that they couldn't reach a deal immediately.
We hear a lot of talk, even world leaders saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza. It's become obvious to everybody that there's a massacre taking place there of civilians, and even world leaders have had to acknowledge that now. But that is all that we're hearing, talk. Why is there no action? For example, couldn't other nations be putting tangible pressure onto Israel to stop this conflict by, for example, imposing sanctions in the same way that countries impose sanctions on Russia for their war in Ukraine?
Of course, they should, but I don't think the will is there yet. Borrell from the European Union summed it up very nicely a couple of days ago when he talked about the way the Western leaders are talking to the Israelis, that they go to Israel and they plead with them, they beg them to change their mind, but no one is saying, we'll stop supplying you with weapons. The court order that took place a couple of days ago again in the Netherlands is important in terms of the court ordering the state not to supply spare parts to the F-35 fighters to the Israelis. But nations like the United States, the United Kingdom can do much more because they're actively supplying weapons, intelligence, etc. To the Israelis. And the first step should be to limit that supply. Then comes the issue of sanctions. But what I think is really needed now is to place Gaza in particular under international protection. What we see is totally unacceptable. And had it been happening anywhere else in the world, people would be calling for no-fly zones, international intervention, international protection, under the responsibility to protect, which was evoked in the Libya conflict. People tried it in Syria, in Bosnia, Kosovo, and so on. So we have many, many examples where the international community had galvanized the efforts to intervene and to protect civilians. The situation today is definitely leading to a massacre. What the Israelis are requesting of the Palestinians is totally impossible. They just say, now you have to move yet again for the fourth or fifth time because we're coming after Hamas. And what is really stupid about all this arrangement is there's no guarantee that Hamas fighters won't move alongside the civilians if they existed in Rafah. We started by accepting the position Israel had about the north. They devastated the north on the assumption that most of the Hamas forces are in the north. Then they said, no, it's not quite accurate. They're not in the north. They may be in the middle of Gaza. Then they went after the middle. Now they're going to the south. And I think they are determined to push people across the borders into Egypt. And from that perspective, it's really Egypt's responsibility to protect its own sovereignty. And if they don't act on a humanitarian basis, they should act on self-defense basis, preemptively, to stop the Israelis from going further into this genocide. And many, many nations now have the excuse to do so because the Genocide Convention and the ICJ's provisional ruling has not only put Israel on notice for 30 days, it also requested all signatories to the convention to take action to prevent a genocide. And so far, we haven't really seen any serious steps. Some nations like Britain, maybe France, have made statements criticizing the Israelis' over-the-top reaction. But those nations need to go further and first start by cutting the supplies of weapons that are used in their names by the Israelis, and then go further to consider issues of sanctions.
Mm-hmm. Sultan, appreciate your analysis. Thanks for coming on. Sultan Barakat, my guest, Director of the Global Institute for Strategic Research at Hamad Bin Khalifa University.